Hi, I'm Lauren, a mom, former teacher turned children's book author, and your host who joins special guests each episode as we share our top kid-lit picks for sparking hard conversations the easy way. Yep, that means everything from tackling bullying and out-of-control anger to celebrating diversity, inclusion, and leading with kindness, plus so much more. My whole mission of my own children's book series, Blooming Rose, is to provide social and emotional support tools for in and out of the classroom, and this podcast is my way to expand that mission even further. So stay tuned as we dive into this week's topic on the Blooming Books podcast. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another fun episode of the Blooming Books podcast. This is our first ever two-part episode because it's such an all-encompassing topic that I've brought in not one, but two special ladies that are going to share their takes on mindfulness and how to model it for our kiddos. So if you're asking yourself, what the heck is mindfulness and am I even doing it right? Stay tuned because we have just an episode for you. And spoiler alert, it's all about no judgment. So let's jump right in, right where you are, and learn something new today together. So I want to start off by saying hello to our first guest, a mindfulness coach whose mission is to help you find the joy in your life, sharing her thoughtful insights on her own podcast, Unrefined Joy, and most importantly, mama to two boisterous kiddos. Welcome to the podcast, my friend Annie Grassi.
Thank you.
Okay, first let's lighten the mood by getting to know you a little better with some rapid fire questions. So you're all about joy. What is one thing that brings you a simple joy every day?
There is not one thing. I think my whole life I thought it had to be the big things that brought me joy. You know, a big house, whatever. It is the little things. It is the cup of tea. It is the opening the blinds in my house every day. It is like the daily rhythms of like a soft blanket. It is the way that my little almost 3-year-old girl comes down the stairs with her morning bedhead, and like those are the little things of joy that I hold on to.
Yes, and we'll dive into that about being mindful, but it really is. Number two, I know you're a big reader, so what is on your TBR or to be read list, just personally?
Ooh, that's so good. I actually just last night started a reread of The Well-Watered Woman.
Oh, yeah.
I read it last summer. I was in a very different season of life last summer, and I kind of wanted to test what it would be like to read it in a more wonderfully tumultuous time.
Yeah.
Last summer felt very easy reading it, and it felt like a really good book, and now I'm like, I want to see what this feels like. And I'm not normally a repeat reader. I'm not normally a repeat movie watcher. This is something that I've learned with children, that like when they love to rewatch movies, it's really annoyed me. But I'm learning that there's actually a lot of beauty in that. So I'm kind of in like a rereading phase of life. I mean, I just finished a book about burnout, about soul burnout, that was so phenomenal. I finished it in like a weekend. Ignite Your Soul. Basically how fire, when it's sparked, if it sparks on like dry kindling, it will ignite so fast and burn it to the ground. But there's also this, she parallels it to a fire that she experienced of her neighborhood in Colorado, how fire burned through their whole area, but that on the other side of it was this beauty that actually came from things burning down, and how you have this opportunity for regrowth and viewing things in a very different light after something like that, after burnout, as opposed to just staying in burnout.
Yeah.
Which is funny, you asked me about this interview, and I felt very, not imposter syndrome about coming on the podcast, because I know that I can talk. It just felt like a very interesting timing to do this, because I was very much in the middle of, I am not enjoying motherhood right now. I am not feeling mindful. I am not feeling like a good example. And so it actually came at a really good time for me to say, wait a minute, where do I want to go with this?
Yeah.
And not stay stuck in that like crispy season of life, because we all have them. Nobody's willing to really talk about it in such a vulnerable way, to say like, I'm not enjoying this. But to also acknowledge that that phase doesn't last forever. I think that's like the sickness of motherhood too, is like we forget, like when we look back at those years, you're like, I don't remember
It was
ever
wonderful.
feeling like
Yeah,
that. Like,
childbirth was
awesome.
amazing. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, it's like, don't ever ask your mother or your mother-in-law, like, hey, did you ever, like, seeking connection, saying like, hey, did you ever have hard days of motherhood where you didn't, want us around? Because she'll say no. Like,
Yeah, they probably
don't
lying.
remember it.
They just don't remember. Yeah.
It's like, it's the sickness of motherhood. Like, you forget it, and it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I told somebody, we're done. We have 2 kids. My husband has kids from his first marriage. So, like, we're good. We've got one of each. And I told a friend of mine the other day, within the span of a week, like 7 days, at the beginning of it, this is so dark, but so vulnerable. Like, I was literally thinking, my children are better off with somebody else. Like, I am not fun right now. I am not enjoyable to be around right now. And then, like, day 7 was like, I think I want a 3rd baby. What in the world? I mean, it's disgusting.
Yeah, hormones, minds, how our minds work is very complicated.
It's so complicated.
But I think that's about being mindful, because you get to your dark moments, but then that also makes you appreciate and so grateful for the happier moments too. Yeah. And I love that notion about like the burnout, like a complete burnout, because I feel like we beat ourselves up for it so much, especially like I always think about like the holidays. The holidays are hectic. Yeah. I don't get stuff done in my business as like I want to. I'm probably more stressed out around the kids more than I'd like to be. And I'm not good on a diet. I love all the things, all the sweets, all the sugars. And then come January, we just feel we beat ourselves up about, I did this and I was so terrible. I was so horrible, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, I've really tried to embrace the natural flows, through the year, whether it's yearly, seasonal, whenever. And it's just natural. It's natural. You're not going to ride a high all the time. You're going to have that wave come back under, but then you'll know, okay, I have an itch to get back on, and like you're going to ride that back.
One of the things that I heard from, I think it was my counselor actually, he told me, or he asked me, he said, what do you think is the thing that stops people most from living? And he said, across the board, it's like this is like a generalized term, but rigidity. And it's the idea of holding on to something, the control of something, not being flexible enough to ride the wave, right? And so often we look back at those seasons of life with either shame or with regret, like frustration, regret, or something that makes you like, I've got clenched fists saying like, I can't believe I did that, as opposed to being like, that was an interesting situation. How can I learn from it and move forward with it?
Okay, so number 3, what is your favorite holiday or season?
I've always said Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday because it's about the food and the gathering and the gratitude and
no gifts.
No gifts.
I feel like gifts really ruin it for Christmas.
It ruins Christmas for me. I felt
it's so stressful. Yeah.
And if I look back, it's so funny. If I look back at the last 3 Christmas seasons, so my oldest is 5. And like as a baby with your firstborn, you just don't know anything. So my first 2 Christmases with him were so fun. We didn't have toys. Like, so everything that came in, like the influx of toys and things, it didn't bother me. The last 3 Christmases, if I look back at end of December, beginning of January, there's this like suffocating feeling that I felt 3 years ago. It was so debilitating after Christmas that's when I started my like intense decluttering, to the point of like nobody was safe.
Yeah.
Nothing was safe. I felt like the walls were closing in on me. And that's actually what was a great catalyst to a lot of other things and decluttering other things and thoughts in my life at that time. But if I look back at even just this past year, I'm like, oh yeah, I felt like it was an attack on my peace. Of like, I enjoyed the holiday season so much, but I hated all of the gifts that came with
it becomes so much about stuff. Yeah. Because I love Christmas, and I love, like you're saying, the simple joys of Christmas. Yeah. The movies,
the message, and everything.
Hot chocolate,
really
like all of all of the coziness of Christmas. But I feel like it's really getting out of hand. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like a lot. What was your second question? What's my favorite holiday and season?
Or just holiday or season.
Yeah, so Thanksgiving, but I love the season of spring. And I think I love it because there's so much hope. Like there feels like hope for the warmth.
I feel like everything is kind of looping back to what you were just saying about burning it to the ground.
Yeah.
Even with like Christmas.
Yeah.
We're going to take it down to the ground.
Yes.
And then like it's a catalyst for something bigger, something better, or a new way, a new approach. And even springtime is like that too. You know, we feel as like winter's kind of like this dead period where everything's dormant.
Yeah.
And then we can bloom, you know?
Like I can acknowledge there is a time and a season for everything. I get that. But sometimes when you're in winter or when you're in the actual flames, you actually feel like there's never going to be a spring or summer. And you feel there is that lie that you tell yourself, or if you believe in like the enemy attack, that will tell you it's going to be like this forever. And I think that I've thought that, you know, it's that sweet sentiment that sometimes the sweet sentiments about early motherhood can really rub people the wrong way of like that this too shall pass. I've made such an like agreement with myself to never say that to another mother, because it's true, but it's not always what you want to hear in the time. And it's almost that whole idea of like, not every season lasts forever and not every season lasts forever. And you can choose to hear that however you want. Like it's going to pass, but also like hold on to what you can while they're little because it's going to pass. So it's like this beautiful heartbreak, but I think just acknowledging that there will be a summer eventually. You just might not be able to see it in the moment, but sometimes if you're willing to sit in the flames and sit in the rubble and sit in winter and say, what can I get out of this? Like, is this my jarring season? Like, is this my canning season of preserves? Or is this what is this season teaching me, instead of like that suffocating feeling of I'm never going to get out and get it. Yeah. Surviving it like makes you feel claustrophobic in it. But if you can say, what can I learn from this? Then it makes spring and summer and the fruit of that, like the literal fruit of that, so much sweeter.
Yeah. I love that. So this week's topic is all about mindfulness and what it is exactly, what it looks like to lead a more mindful life for ourselves as adults and for our students or children. So I came across this quote in one of the books we'll be talking about in a second from Kristina Marcelli-Sargent, where she simply states that mindfulness is paying attention on purpose. So as a thoughtful leader and coach, what is mindfulness to you, and what are your tips for, you know, leading a life with more intention and purpose, and in turn, gratitude?
I will say ditto to that. I love that.
Isn't it so simple?
Purpose. Yeah,
but
I think I will stumble over my words to say we will overcomplicate something that's supposed to be so simple. We have all of the tools that we need free inside of our bodies and minds. It's just a matter of tapping into them. Meditation, mindfulness, stillness. I think we really, as humans, like just overcomplicate things because we think that it's supposed to be work and it's supposed to be hard work to achieve something so great. This is like, there's a big parallel for me with faith. And it's the idea of like, you're supposed to work at it and check the boxes and do the Bible studies and read your Bible. And like, it's like, I have to show that I'm doing this, as opposed to just like, one of the greatest things that you can do inside your faith is just sitting still and letting God in and just being. And it's the same thing with mindfulness, is allowing your thoughts to race, like, until they slow down and get tired. It's allowing your thoughts. It's that, there's this like really great imagery of, imagine that your head is like there's a male and a female part of Velcro, and that your head is that soft part, and every thought that goes by is that loop and hook part, that if each thought goes by is that loop and hook part, it will stick. But if the thoughts are also that soft and fuzzy part, just like your own head or your own hair, they'll just brush by. And that's kind of what you want for mindfulness, is to not ruminate, to not become so rigid, to not become so, clenched fists controlling over your thoughts and emotions.
Hold on to every single one.
And to let it stick, right?
Yeah.
And so it just kind of floats by like clouds in the sky. But yeah, we really, We really overcomplicate it. I think there's a lot of beauty in going for a walk. There's so many parallels here. I feel like I could talk about, because all of these have been part of my experience where, like, in the workout world, we think that working out harder is always going to be better, and lifting heavier weights is always going to be better. There's a time and a place, there's a season for everything. But there is really, I believe, this is my unsolicited opinion, is that I believe that there's nothing better than walking. Your body was designed to walk. It still counts as a quote unquote workout. If somebody needs permission to hear this, like, it counts as a workout. Like, get outside. The beauty of getting outside, the beauty of letting your body naturally move. Something that I've recently done, and this is not intended to be like a soapbox thing, but I've gone into the minimalist shoes, so like Vivo barefoot shoes, and actually letting my body do what it's supposed to do naturally, as opposed to where I was, which is the complete opposite of like a Hoka shoe, which again, there's no shade on Hoka if that's something that helps somebody so much. But for me, and what I've determined in my life, the overarching statement of what I'm going to say about everything that I'm talking about is that less is better.
I was just about to say less is more.
That's actually one of the books that I love so much.
It's called Less is More?
I think it's When Less Becomes More.
Yes.
By Emily Lay. Oh, that book was one of the most confirming. It's such an easy read. It's beautiful, light blue cover. I think it's When Less Becomes More. I would recommend that to everybody. It does have a faith component in it, but there's just so much about decluttering and working out and scheduling and like your children's schedules, and just how much we overcomplicate things in today's world. It's like society makes us think that we're supposed to be doing.
We're not doing all the things.
If you're not doing it, then what are you doing with your life? If your schedule isn't busy, how do you answer somebody's question? How are you doing? I'm busy. Like
And I don't know if it's maybe like since the pandemic times or something, but I feel like, or maybe it's just the people that the circles that I orbit on Instagram are, more like-minded, but I feel like everyone is really kind of taking a step back from that.
I'd like to believe that too.
The society is just like racing, like this rat race, literally. And so I think that's kind of what behind like mindfulness is like kind of just taking out all the distractions, taking out all the clutter, and just being present and being observant. And, as adults, we're catching up to this, right? Because I kind of mentioned earlier that like, we didn't talk about a lot of SEL topics that we talk about on the podcast when we were growing up, as, elementary students or, even in your homes. And it's not because we just didn't know any better to say, okay, how are you? Let's check in with how you're feeling. Let's check in with how, this experience makes you feel. Or and being mindfulness, I think, is probably just like the root of all of those SEL, kind of built on top of that, because you just have to just stop and just recognize like where you are in that moment. And it's almost like we're working backwards, like as adults now we have to teach our kids how to unwind, like they get so wound up with sports and school, and you have to have straight A's and you have to have perfect attendance, which I just go on record saying I hate perfect attendance. Perfect attendance is like never my goal. No. Because that means we're in school all day, every day. It's like if you have an experience or something fun you need to go do with your kid, go do it. Yep. And as a teacher, I was like, we'll make them up when they get back. It's fine. But, and I think that's just something that we're trying to get back now as adults learning, at this level. It's like, okay, well now we can catch our kids when they're, young or even teenagers. Moving forward, how can we, get them on board with this too?
It's an interesting, I'm kind of having this like vision come to mind that I wanted to talk about. When I would go to school, in elementary school, my desk that I had, I remember like vividly, like I think it was like second grade or third grade. It's the big wooden one that the top actually lifted, like creaky lifted, and the big metal bottom of it. And I remember the satisfaction and joy. And I never knew what that feeling, it was a visceral, like a bodily feeling of when I can open my desk and see all of my pencils perfectly lined up, erasers in the corner, and I loved being able to go in and it was mine, and like I could shift things around. And I say that not from a perfectionist standpoint, but from a point of, it was because my room was the complete opposite of that. So when I went to school, that level of calm that I felt, because I had less inventory to manage and less things to manage and less to like, I had joy in being able to like, I only had 3 pencils, so I only had 3 to choose from. But when I would go home, my room was an absolute disaster. And this was something that I carried with me into adulthood, was that I could never get out of, I'm using kind of air quotes, I could never get out of that phase of life. That's just who I took it on as my identity, that I was just a messy person, that I was just a cluttered person, and that I could never get rid of things. And then I would always, anytime my mom would tell me like, go clean your room, or like, there was never, this isn't to my mom's fault, but there was never an encouragement of learning how to get rid of things. And I'm not trying to turn this into a decluttering podcast, but this is so intertwined with mindfulness to me, which I never realized. Because I used to, even in the beginning of our marriage, I would tell my husband, he's a very neat and orderly person, like to the point where you could look around the house, there's nothing of his. If there's something of his in the living space, it's like his hat and keys. Whereas I felt like my stuff was just infiltrating everything. I was like, how? But in the beginning of our marriage, I would tell him like, oh, clutter doesn't bother me. He'd be like, how can you live like this? How can you do, you know? And then I also realized that there was a big correlation to those dark days pre-kids, where doing dishes was like the hardest thing ever. Getting dressed was the hardest thing ever. Those like depressive states. And I can honor and acknowledge that. But it's interesting to think I've not had any of those moments since my radical decluttering that I was talking about 3 years ago. But as a kid, when my mom would tell me, you know, go clean out your room, there was such an emotional attachment to things and such a weight to things that I couldn't part with them. And then it would get to the point where if I would clean, I'd need the visual space, but things would just end up in a, excuse me, things would just end up in a bag of doom that would just sit there in the corner forever and ever. So that very much paralleled my emotional life, where I could visually clean things, but there would be an emotional set of heaviness that would be sitting at the back of my mind that I wouldn't allow me to actually be mindful, clear-headed, calm. And that is something that I've really tried to work on with, you know, there's challenges with every age and stage of children. I'm, you know, fortunate enough right now, right, where my kids are so little, where I can teach them about getting rid of things and donating things to other kids. But it's still easy for me to do it like when they're at school. I can still get rid of stuff and they will not notice. But I'm sure as they get older, they'll become more attached to things, or where did that thing go, or where is this, or I'd like to hold on to this, which I know that there's a way to be able to honor all of that. But teaching my kids mindfulness, for me, looks like teaching them that things don't have ownership over them, because I needed to learn that, and that took me 25 years, right? Like when at least 25 years of undoing and right? Like it's that generation, or at least for my parents, they showed love in buying things.
Yeah.
And
I think that's a very easy trap to fall into.
It is.
You know?
I mean, in my garage right now, I still have all 5 original American Girl dolls.
Those are worth some money now.
Probably 75 enclosed in case Beanie Babies. I donated 200 of them 3 years ago. Yeah. But like, there is that sense of, I want to show my children, again, with mindfulness, that love can just be there. Yeah. Instead of bought and purchased, or instead of
the experiences, it's the memories.
Yes. That's
what we've really leaned into. We're talking about Christmas being overwhelming. The past couple of years, we've leaned into experience type gifts. Yeah. You know, let's go have lunch and get our nails done, which my daughter's into now. I'm all about that.
I love it.
You know, let's go to the zoo, or go to the park, or, you know, go somewhere and experience things together, instead of just adding more and more to the mound. You know, there's a mound of clutter. Yes. And I think being mindful really starts with, you know, kind of trudging through all of that and picking out what is bringing you joy, what sparks joy, right?
Yeah, sure.
And what serves a purpose and what doesn't, you know, because you can, especially when you talk about just being outside in nature, it's easier maybe to be more mindful if you're out in nature, right? our kids are going to be drawn towards animals and seeing flowers and with the breeze and stuff. But how can you, kind of bring that back into your home as well?
Yeah, because if you think about it, why are you so mindful when you're out in nature?
Right.
Because you're not bringing anything out there with you. You are aware of, you have the emotional capacity to be aware of the breeze, and to be aware of the leaves that are out there that you don't have ownership over, but you get to just enjoy.
And you don't have your tablet or your favorite toy or, whatever you're dragging around to distract you from that. And I think that's a big part of kind of what we're talking about, like unwinding, unclawing, their little fingers are going to be, grab hold of their, their tablets, their devices, especially as they get older. It's scary. But just put those things down and be mindful of what's around you. It was funny because we kind of talked about it earlier, but when I texted you about scheduling this podcast, you said how ironic the timing was because you were in a season of not modeling this very well yourself. But I think it's actually a great tool to show your kids the imperfection, the humility, the grace, and accountability side of life for us adults as well. So how do you kind of correct your course, so to say, like in front of your kids? I
do a lot of apologizing. I do a lot of apologizing. And I find that bedtime is a really beautiful time to have good conversations. I do believe that there's a threshold of age, whereas like my 5-year-old, he and I can have these really great conversations. He'll get it. My almost 3-year-old, she'll be like, okay, mommy, read the book now. Whereas like my 5-year-old, I can say to him, hey, last week, mommy was having a really hard time. And I just want you to know, like something that I really want him to know specifically is that I don't just love him when he's doing what I ask him to do. I don't just love him when he's quote unquote performing well, or when he's only when he's being kind to his sister, or only when he's cleaning up, or like I want him to know that even when he's had hard moments, that I love him in those too. And so it's important for me to kind of model for me and in this home to be like, hey, mommy had a really hard week. I wasn't very kind to you. I know that God still loves me even through all of that. And and I'll apologize to him. And it's really this beautiful, open conversation of he'll say to me, I still love you, mommy. And it ends up being this human conversation. And I don't think it's to the fault. Again, it's not the fault of the previous generation that they didn't apologize. There was a toughness that they had growing up that was like, oh, you're crying, I'll give you something to cry about, right? And there's this toughness of like, do I think that there's a middle ground? Yes. Do I think, again, unpopular opinion, do I think that things have gotten too soft sometimes? Yes. But I do believe that there is a human aspect that kids need to see, that people make mistakes and that they can move forward through them. And I think that was a big thing for me in my life as a child, but also in my faith life, is I never saw failure. I never saw people making mistakes. I never saw sin like exampled in a way that was like, and you can still be loved. So there was this hiding that came with all of that for me as I grew up, that I've just in the last like 3 or 4 years kind of chipped away at and said, oh, wait a minute. I can still be this great mom, even though I snapped at my kids last night, even though I, said something or reacted a terrible way to them. I can move forward with that through apology, through that like genuine reconciliation. I want my kids also to not just say, I'm sorry. That also rubs me the wrong way. I'm like, but why? Why are you sorry? What is it? Do you mean it? Does the other person forgive you? They might not.
And is that still okay?
And is that still okay? Yeah. Can you move on with yourself and use that apology to better yourself? And how do you, again, it's also important for me as a mom to model apologizing and then course correction.
Yes.
Not just making the same mistakes every time, because if my child is going to see me every single night apologize for snapping at them, that's not okay.
That loses its meaning.
Completely loses its meaning.
Yeah.
And also it makes me feel like, oh, well, I can just apologize. I'll just apologize for that later. It's not that big of a deal. And then it totally dilutes the idea of like pausing when I feel like I'm going to snap. Sometimes, I mean, I will be very audible with my kids and be like, Mommy needs a minute. I feel like I'm going to snap at you like I did the other day, and I really don't want to do that again.
Yeah. I
need a minute. I'm going to step outside. I'm going to go pray. I am going to take some deep breaths. You can take them with me. And I mean, genuinely modeling that is.
And I think it was like for, this past generation, there's so many things when you become an adult that you realize your parents weren't perfect at.
Sure.
But they were just good at hiding it. Or it was just the norm to, we're not going to, I'm the authority. I'm the person to be respected. And this is what I say goes, and that's just how everyone was kind of raised. And I feel like this new generation, again, we're saying, okay, here's how I'm imperfect, and I'm not expecting you to be perfect either. Here's how I'm going to take accountability, and here's how you can take accountability when you mess up too. Like, I think it's very powerful and important as parents or even teachers, to recognize like, oh wait, hold up, let me redo that.
Yeah.
Or, because you're modeling for them what they're undoubtedly going to come across. Nobody is going to be perfect, or should we expect them to be?
Yeah.
So I love that about, just being really mindful about yourself and what that looks like with your kids as well.
Yeah.
So growth in itself is a journey, whether we're focusing on our own personal growth and practicing being more mindful, grateful, or conscious of the world and things around us, or trying to raise kids that will naturally have a wonder and joy for the world around them, which is our ultimate goal, right?
Yeah.
So what do you believe are the long-term benefits of living a deeper, more mindful life and setting your kids up to do the same?
Ooh, I mean, raising a well-adjusted adult and a kind adult. I think there can be a great emphasis, and this is not stirring up a discussion on how somebody chooses to put their kid through school, how they choose. This is not a discussion on that, but I genuinely believe that emotional intelligence and kindness and the capacity to have empathy for other humans far outweighs any degree that any child will ever have. And I think that there is this world that unknowingly, maybe knowingly, maybe unintentionally, focuses on the accolades and the awards and the degrees and the letters and the trophies. But really, like, what does it look like instead of your kid getting a trophy on the sports field? What does it look like to be on the opposing team and to not have to teach your child to go help somebody stand back up again, or to check on, an opponent that they just knocked down? I say that you can't teach that, but you can teach that because you model it, right? Yeah. And after the game, you have that conversation like, hey, what could have been better? What do you wish had happened to you? I don't even know if this is answering the question, but essentially, what's the goal? Like, the goal is to have a well-adjusted adult, but with like a regulated nervous system.
Yes.
That they know how to also care for themselves and to get back to their own homeostasis and not seek things like social media, drugs, alcohol, food, attention, acknowledgement, validation to fill them.
Yeah, fill the egos, fill the mind. Yeah, first.
I mean, that would be like, if you could ask me what I would want for JP and Charlie, it's that they would live a very full and free life that they actually enjoy. There's that funny idea of when you're a kid, all you want is to be an adult, and then it's like, but what are we modeling for children today? Are we modeling that being
what does adulting mean?
Is it even fun?
No.
Like, I hope that my kids see my marriage, like our marriage, and that they think like, that's what I want. Like, not because most kids are going to think that anyways, that's what I deserve, but like, I actually want my kids to say, that's what I want. I want, for my daughter, for her husband one day to like always greet her with a kiss and a hug and to adore her. Like, I want her to look at Todd and I and to be like, that's actually what I want. I want them to see, this is really important too, modeling inside of our marriage, there have been
communication.
Communication. There have been very few times. I can think of it because it was so recent. It was in this like dusty burnout stage that was probably the first time ever my children have seen like an actual, like a lowercase f fight. I would not even call it a fight. But
my son calls them squabbles.
Squabble is the perfect word. Okay. But because we were in the car and it was an enclosed situation, it felt so much more heightened. And it was so important for me that when we got to our destination, that we undid our buckles. I looked my husband in the eye, I apologized, and I hugged him and kissed him. And my son got out of his seat so fast and unbuckled and like came and hugged both of us. And it had nothing to do with him. But like the feeling in his body, I can only imagine watching in front of him, like on TV. It was like his two people he loves the most, not be on the same page about something, but then in the end, make that major reconciliation. I mean, it was like his body. He like needed to throw himself on us and hug, but I love you, mommy. I love you, daddy. I mean, it was so sweet, but it was also like, that's so important.
And again, it's the more, vulnerable points in whether it's marriage or adulting that they have to see that, okay, marriages aren't going to be perfect. They're going to be hard. It's hard to communicate. It's hard to, we tell them to share all the time, and we tell them to, get along and do all the things, but, it's such a balance. And so everything they're seeing as adults, deal with and how we deal with it. And it's not to put pressure on people thinking, oh, well, you have to act perfectly in these situations all the time. But, when my husband and I squabble, which most of the time it's just us, we're venting about other people. And so we're like raising our voice, like, yeah, he did that. Oh, yeah. So he thinks we're squabbling. I'm like, no, we're actually not.
We're the same team.
We're not disagreeing on anything. Yeah. We're just talking about this other person here that made us mad, and then now we're both mad, But, and so, but they need, they need to see that as well. And in a safe and, environment where they're not going to feel too unstable and insecure from that, or insecure. Okay, let's dive into our book picks on mindfulness. You are a bountiful reader. Do you have a book pick for adults that is kind of a good introduction to practicing more mindful? I know you mentioned earlier the book, what was it, Less is More? Or doing less with more? Yeah.
That's an awesome book.
I will link to that. I will get the actual title and link to that, but yeah.
I think this is going to be a really long-winded answer to what I'm going to get at. But I think it's important for whoever the listener is to say, what is it about mindfulness that I'm seeking? Because I could recommend a mindfulness book. There's a one called Goodbye Things. It's not a mindfulness book, but it's about decluttering. Yeah. I could recommend that When Less Becomes More. I could recommend one of my all-time favorite books is The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. To me, that book is not intentionally about mindfulness, but it's about scaling back your schedule. And it's like, it asks you, why do you spend so much time trying to do more or hurry? And that's a great book. But also, and this is kind of the parenting realm, which like obviously we're talking to parents. Some of my favorite books about mindfulness for myself have been about parenting. So my like top two of all time favorite parenting books, I'll use quotes of parenting books, are Simplicity Parenting by Dr. Kim John Payne, and then Hunt, Gather, Parent. That book blew my lid off my head. And I think it's because it's like my all-time favorite, because it goes into the true simplicity of having children be part of your life to the point where you enjoy them more. Yeah. And she goes into all of these other cultures and places all over the world and sees how they do sleep and cleaning and chores and, family involvement and family dinners and things like this. And how do they handle whining and crying and toys? And it goes back to the absolute basics of like involving your children when they want to be involved. Some of the biggest tantrums that come from, a 2 or 3 year old is that they just they're tiny humans that want to be involved in everything that you do. And so as silly as, I'm going to use a very silly parallel, but like doing the dishes can be a very mindful thing. You can find a lot of peace in like using the suds and washing away the soap and making something that's dirty become clean. When you add a 2-year-old that's like a wrench in the system, why is that so hard for us? It's because it disrupts the flow. But ultimately, what does the 2-year-old want? They just want to be part of it.
Yeah.
So how do you involve a 2-year-old in loading your dishwasher? And then there becomes that rigidity, right? Circling back to the beginning of our conversation, the rigidity. What if they break a dish? So what she says in the book, I think it's from her. She's got some really hard name to pronounce. I'm not even going to try. What she says is essentially that a broken dish, that mess is an investment in your future. Because that mess teaches a child, yeah, that sucks to have a broken dish because then you have to clean more. But what it teaches the child is they actually have to be more gentle with it. I believe that every situation can become a mindful situation, that you can include a whiny 2-year-old in something that gives them the confidence to be able to be part of it. So then that makes your dishwashing experience, it makes it longer.
I was going to say time-wise.
Time-wise,
we're always under time
and
crunch.
again, it goes back to ruthless elimination hurry. Why are we always in such a hurry? This is a big thing from that book, Simplicity Parenting. He talks about not cluttering your schedule. And when we have more time to let a child make mistakes and then learn from it and help you clean up, and you're not rushing them, well, then it makes the experience better for everybody. And then again, it invests in your future of you have like a 6-year-old loading your dishwasher for you, right? Better. And then it's just, so I don't know if I don't necessarily want to go down the route of book recommendations of the typical Atomic Habits or High Five Habit, or what's one of the other ones that are High Performance Habits, right? All of these things have habits in them and they can lead to mindfulness. But I really think for me, some of my my best advances in mindfulness inside of motherhood, because you can't separate the two.
Right.
I think that's
that's the biggest mindfulness challenge of all.
It is. And it was the biggest hurdle that I had to cross, was to say everything that I did with mindfulness before kids changed. Of course it did. But it's my resistance and that rigidity to not allowing the fluidity to come in and to say, how can I still do this with kids around? How can I still do this, right? Like, I gave up meditating for several years. And in January, when I think what was my embers were burning, beginning burnout, they were flickering. A friend of mine was like, well, didn't you used to meditate? I was like, yeah, but that was years ago. And that was before kids. I can't do that anymore. And now I'm realizing, and that's been probably one of the best things that I've added back into my world. Now, does meditation happen every single day? I might miss a day. I think I missed like 5 days in the whole month of March. But I look back at that again, like what we were talking about earlier, instead of with that shame or that like, how could I? Like, okay, well, I wonder if I could miss less days this month. Maybe I won't. But if I do, that's okay too. But that has become my thing, that I will wake up 10 minutes earlier for, to have that time. I've realized journaling and reading, those were things that I used to tell myself I had to do without children because they would distract me. I've now realized, like, thank God for Magnetiles and Legos and things, so I will work it into my day, and I will journal while the kids are doing something. I will read while the kids are playing. I will do that, like, instead of trying to set aside an hour like I used to. How can you incorporate a sense of mindfulness into every breath instead of feeling like you have to hold your breath for the next big exhale?
Yeah. And I think that's kind of why, this episode is a little hard to, put one finger on what is mindfulness. Because there are so many different aspects to it, whether it's decluttering your things, whether it's decluttering your schedule, whether it's, taking more time out to do things that you enjoy and do experiences with your kids. Like, it's just a combination of all those things, right? And that's why I think it's overwhelming for people really to get a sense of, okay, well, being mindful is just being aware of all of life's distractions. And that doesn't mean you necessarily have to tackle each one all the time, at once, but say, okay, how can I be more mindful when, disciplining my children? Or how can I be more mindful when I'm spending time with my children? How can we as a family be more mindful of, putting our devices down, or, having more intentional time together? Like all those little pieces. I feel like once you start chipping away at one piece, then it kind of,
like a domino effect.
Yeah, it kind of chips into other pieces, and it gets a little bit more easy to manage. So, there's always room for improvement, right?
Yeah, if you're open to change.
Yeah. I love the kind of notion of like, once you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
And it seems so overwhelming at first, but just take it one notch at a time, and then you become aware of something else, and then it evolves into something else.
You got to pull the right string that allows everything else to fall. You got to pull the string that feels good for you. Maybe it is starting by going out for a daily walk. Maybe it's starting with 10 minutes meditation. Maybe it's starting by decluttering your junk drawer. Maybe it's canceling your kids' ballet or soccer or something that just feels like too much for that week, weekly schedule. It's going to look different for everybody.
Yeah. Okay, so I did snoop on your Amazon favorites from your website and noticed this children's book on it called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little about this and why it's one of your faves for kids? What is the age range? It looks a little bit older, right?
So I'm pretty sure that he wrote this book.
Is it for kids or for adults?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yes. Because it is, I would consider it a children's book, but it is for
more like a middle grade book, maybe.
There's not necessarily a story plot. Here's the thing. You can open up this book to absolutely any page, and you will find one of the most beautifully illustrated, but like deep soul hitting quotes. They ended up making this. His name's Charlie Mackesy. They made a movie on Apple TV.
Oh.
That I'm sure it won all kinds of awards because it's so gently illustrated. It's soft. It's like there's like ink strokes for the pictures, and there's classical music behind the whole thing. And it's my husband's favorite movie. Period. We have watched it probably 30 times. The first 5 times I think I cried, and that's after reading the book. This book to read through the book would probably take, oh my gosh, it would probably take a long time. But there's like every page that you look at, there's these beautiful illustrations with like a quote that just hits deep. I'm actually gonna read you. I have 2 that are, I don't know what they are, but I have 2 dog ears in here, which means that they must have been really good. And this just will probably give you a sense of what the book is about. So it's a little boy, and he is traveling alone and in search of home, right? He wants home, and he along the way stumbles across a mole, and this cute little old mole with, who has this obsession with cake. And then he stumbles across this fox who wants to eat the mole, but essentially the fox gets stuck in a snare, and the mole releases the fox. So now the fox is like behind the mole and the boy, walking along, grateful that the mole let him out, but hesitant, thinking, he's a very alone individual. I don't trust anybody. And then they come across this big white horse, and this horse is this beautiful creature that like has so much wisdom and like this deep, calm voice in the movie, but you can sense it in the book. And he has this thing that he hides from everybody, and it's essentially that he can fly. And so the book, the funny thing is you read the book, and if you watch the movie on Apple TV, you kind of get a sense for like every single person in their life can relate to one of the characters.
Yeah.
And it's just this deep, profound sense of home is actually who you're with, right? Home is who you're with. So he's searching for home, and along the way he finds these friends and that become family, and that's his home. And so I'm going to read you 2 of the pages. This is so sweet. The boy says this: "Sometimes I worry you'll all realize that I'm ordinary," said the boy. And the mole says, "Love doesn't need you to be extraordinary." It's just these pages are just so rich and deep. And let's read one of the others. One that's like way at the end of the book, right? The boy asks, "What do we do when our hearts hurt?" And I think it's the horse that says this: "We wrap them with friendship, shared tears and time, till they wake hopeful and happy again." It's just this like, every page is like that you you read this and you feel comforted. And a lot of the words are probably words that we always wish we had heard from somebody else. I think one of the ones that I don't even need to look it up, but it's like, what is the bravest thing that you'll ever say? Help.
Oh, yeah.
It's these beautiful sentiments of, and so I think, this is a great book. I was gifted this before JP was born. So technically, my friend knew that it was a children's book, but she bought it for me.
Yeah. And
it's one of those, like, this is a sweet gift to give anybody at any age. And it's a great coffee table book because you can just open it up to any page and you'll be able to read something that just kind of hits you. And it's just this beautiful, like, I don't know. It's just, it's one of my favorite books of all time.
I love that because I think we've said on the podcast before that, even books that are geared towards children, quote unquote children's books, adults can learn so much from, or if not more than the kids from.
Agreed, 100%.
And, as an author, when I come across things that are just so well written,
so beautiful,
or so well, illustrated, or movies that are just, cinematically beautiful, I'm a huge fan of that. So speaking of the book I was going to mention, I absolutely love Joanna Gaines has her first book. It's called The World Needs Who You Were Made to Be.
Yes.
Now she's got a second one.
Oh.
FYI.
Yes.
So her next book is called The World Needs the Wonder You See.
Yes.
And guess what it's about? It's about being mindful, observant, and curious to the worlds around you. Everything she does is so well done. The rhyming cadences, the illustrations, so I just highly recommend that one. We were reading it together, my daughter and I, the other day, and it's like, some people just see the woods as, just a bunch of trees, but what can we really see? Well, how can we dive in and, like, really look closer? And so that's just a very simple, mindful activity.
So much to learn.
I also wanted to add an activity book I came across. It's called Mindful Games for Kids, and it includes 50 activities to model and practice concentration and attention for kids, because they need, real concrete examples on, you can't just be like, oh, let's be mindful. They have to see, like, how, what does that look like? It's by the author I mentioned earlier, Kristina Marcelli-Sargent, and I love the explicit directions it gives for sitting still, observing your surroundings, and focusing on your breath, sharpening your concentration, because, unfortunately, we said we all live now in a society where high engagement, high stimulation, and busy schedules are central, right? And it seems so odd, but we do have to teach our kids that it's okay to slow down, savor moments, get bored, and get curious. So I did want to also note we have a resource called Art Has Heart, which is doing double duty for this episode on mindfulness, as well as ties into our following episode on art. And it's a sketch activity with fun prompts like a scavenger hunt for drawing. And we also have a 5 senses scavenger hunt as well. That's perfect for mindfulness. And, all the books mentioned in our episodes, as well as these activities, are always linked on our website, bloomingrosekids.com/podcast.
Ooh, that sounds great.
Annie, thank you again so much for joining us. I know you like to unplug and take breaks on social media, and I love seeing your face out and about around town, including our Katie Women in Business meetups and your awesome workshops. So do you want to share where your account and podcast for listeners to check out and how they can get in touch with you if they're interested in a coaching call?
Yeah, I am currently on a social media break for all of 2025. You can find me still on there. My public account is Unrefined Joy Podcast. My private account, you can follow me there. I just won't accept it until 2026, but you can follow me there, Annie_Grassi. And then my podcast can be found on Apple and Spotify. That's really where a lot of my heart goes right now. I've got an email blast list that has not been fed into since,
It's rising from the embers.
It is rising from the embers. And I am very
It's on a journey.
Waiting until it actually feels right instead of trying to force it this time.
You can't.
I am waiting till every little bit settles. But yeah, otherwise right now I am not, I'm just hanging out, I'm just hanging out. I'm not doing any, I do one-off coaching sessions still. Just reach out to me through email, coachanniegrassi.com.
Okay.
It's the best way to get in touch. I still love doing kind of one-offs, but otherwise not publicly pushing anything out there.
That sounds great, though.
Yeah.
Okay, you do not want to miss out connecting with this ray of sunshine and breath of fresh air, literally. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is fun.
So next, I'm with a fellow children's book author who's also an entrepreneur with a rich and flavorful background and a passion for exploring new places and new cultures with her kids, which we'll see how that plays out in her book series in a bit. But welcome to our little podcast, Maria Castellucci Moore.
Thank you, Lauren. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I love getting to know our guests a little bit better with some rapid fire questions. Are you up for that?
I'm up for it.
Okay, so first, you are a part of your family's vineyard in Napa Valley, which, I mean, swoon. How amazing does that sound? But I have to know, are you team red, team white, or team blush, or does it just depend on the pairing?
That's a great question. I would say I'm more of a blush and white gal, even
Yeah.
though our estate vineyard is Bordeaux varietals from France and heavy on the Cabernet. But I personally have a more feminine palate,
Yeah.
and I'm into the more rosé. We make a beautiful rosé and Sauvignon Blanc. So
Oh, me too.
that's
I
more
love
that's
the
my
I love the
speed.
sweet ones too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so number two, you're also a world traveler. So do you have a favorite cuisine?
I do. I'm Italian, but my favorite cuisine is Asian,
Mm.
specifically sushi,
Oh, yes.
which I did not grow up eating, but came to love it in my late 20s. And yeah, it's my favorite.
Yeah, I love sushi too. I could eat it every day, literally. Okay, and number three, do you speak any other languages? And if not, what is one you would love to learn?
I do. I speak Italian and Spanish, and my bucket list is to learn French.
Oh, wow.
But
So
one day.
did you grow up speaking like Italian in your household as well?
So I wasn't spoken to. I'm first generation American. My
Mm-hmm.
parents came to this country in 1971 and like immersed themselves with no English at all into the American culture. So when I was born, fast forward 7 years, they were already kind of speaking English in the home and trying to advance in this country. So I unfortunately did not get the direct native language from my parents, but I heard it my whole life
Mm-hmm.
and just took an interest and I love languages. So I was almost a linguistics major in school. So it's one of the art forms that I love so much. So
I love that. Yeah,
yeah, so I kind of took it upon myself to learn. So
that's cool. Love that. Okay, so this episode we've been talking about mindfulness, and with our first guest, Annie, we got a little more clear on what it is exactly and how to put that into practice. But I came across your series and I love the concept of weaving these ideas and experiences into such beautiful children's stories. So, first, can you tell us a little bit about your two books and the ideas and inspirations around them?
yes, absolutely. So I took a course in mindfulness and it really changed the way I looked at everyday life. Um, it was kind of through my own self-discovery journey that I learned how to turn inward, and
Mm-hmm.
actually that is the recipe for joy. So I think once I had a clear message, I thought, how can I convey this message to a younger audience? My dream has always been to write a children's book ever since I was a mother, which was my oldest now just turned 14. So
Oh,
um, yeah, so I developed this series called the Traveling Mindfulness series, and it's based on each one of my four children. And it's set in a different city that I've lived in or had a very significant experience in. So it kind of weaves my love of um, children, travel, mindfulness. It's about each protagonist in the series has a day kind of like their typical Sunday, but they see that typical day with brand new, fresh eyes.
I
So,
love that.
and it's really about honing inward and using your five senses to discover your own unique joy, which I think is different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's been really fun. I just launched my second book in the series. My first one's Vivienne in Paris. I was engaged in Paris, so that's
Oh,
very
I
romantic
was about to
and
say you can't get more romantic than like, and a
No.
vineyard in Napa Valley, besides maybe
No, you
Paris.
can. Yeah. Like Paris was like the top. So he did well in that regard.
Oh,
So that setting is very magical, just in its own right. But for me personally, it kind of took on a different meaning. So Vivienne is set in Paris, and she, rides through the city of Paris and visits her favorite, Sunday spots and her friends at the different, cafes and different museums. And but she kind of takes that sound, taste, smell, sight in a whole new light. So that's what each book is about. My second one is Sofia in Rome. My oldest is Sofia, and I lived in Rome in my 20s. So it's been fun to kind of do a back, you're basically doing some homework on your kids and figuring
mhm.
out what makes them tick, what makes them feel alive, and merging that with travel and, joy seeking and mindfulness and everything. So it's been really, really rewarding, really fun.
Yeah, I love that concept. I mean, because even, we talk about mindfulness and it's a lot about what we have to learn as adults, right? Because we didn't talk about, the social emotional learning and all of our emotions and things like that when we were kind of growing up as we are now with our generation. But there's so much that we have to learn as adults in order to pass it on, to our kids. So I love that concept of just taking like a typical day. Like, yes, you might be in Paris or Rome or whatever, but you can apply it to, any day of your life and how you can find something special to appreciate or to notice or to observe, no matter where you are. So I really love that.
Thank you. Yeah, 100%. I mean, the books are geared towards children, but
Hmm.
honestly, it's like a very large overarching subject that it was a challenge to kind of pare it down for a younger audience. The books are probably for like 5 to 9 years old,
Yeah.
I would say, second, third, fourth, fifth grade. And but honestly, I learned these tools as an adult in my
Hmm.
40s.
Yeah.
So, if you can start those conversations early in life with your children or with, people that you care about at a younger age, I think it would serve them well.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny, but I didn't think about it till just now, like being children's authors. Yeah. Like, yes, of course, our main audience is children, but I've read so many children's books now, and I learn something new from children's books all the times too. So it's almost like, we're teaching the adults along with the kids too.
We totally are. I mean, it's the adults that buy them, right? So in a
Right.
way, like you have to, your audience, it's for the child, but I think
Hmm. There's a
the
little
adult,
overlap. Yeah, everyone can learn a
yeah,
little something.
the adult has to connect with it first, I think. So
Right.
yeah.
So traveling with kids can be a whirlwind of logistics and planning and, all the things out of routines and stuff. But what are your tips for getting your kids to kind of slow down, appreciate, and fully experience different cultures when y'all are out and about, but also just kind of in the real world?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think traveling kind of naturally allows you to slow down because you're
Hmm.
curious, you're in a new place. Um, so I think with that curiosity and newness, if you will, that kind of brings a greater heightened sense of awareness no matter where you are. So I think it's almost easier when you're outside of your daily routine
Yeah.
to kind of stop and smell the roses, if you will. But it's really honing in that curiosity, kind of that sense of wonder. And I think anywhere you go, and you don't even need to go anywhere. But for the sake of your question, I think traveling kind of allows for you to naturally have that greater sense of awareness.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not easy. It depends where you're going, who you have, how many you have with you. And I think not being so overscheduled is we live in a
Yes.
very fast world, faster than when we were being raised by our parents. So I think not overscheduling your family when you go somewhere and kind of allowing for those sacred moments of stillness or just not running from one appointment to another. You're also giving not only yourself that grace, but you're kind of giving your children an opportunity to soak in and be imaginative in where they are. So
Yeah.
it allows for a little more freedom and greater awareness, I think.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the things I learned pretty early on as a new parent. Now I'm an old parent, but when I was a new parent, and we would travel and you just try to like, keep your schedule full. But if you're traveling with small children, especially, that's just too much. There's too overstimulating and, they get tired and they have meltdowns and everybody ends up being miserable. So I'm definitely a huge fan of just kind of going with the flow as much as you can. Um, but also, are there any things that you would maybe, I guess, suggest to put into play, like, journaling or drawing, or, I mean, just putting screens down, right? Like, especially when you're back at home, like to really get those kids, out the door. And, my kids are really into drawing right now. So I'm like, go draw a tree outside. Just go really sit and look and observe the bark and if an insect is on it or the leaves and the patterns and things. So is that something that y'all like to do as well? Or is there anything in particular that helps with that?
Yeah, I think when you're on a trip, I do that as well. I give each child some type of journal with either colored pencils or some little kit for them to draw, take notes, doodle around. Like it's kind of their own little travel journal. So we definitely do that. I think when you come home, we don't have screens in our house at all. We only have like a television in our living room because we're
Yeah.
huge sports fans, but we don't have phones or iPads or any of that. So we actually live very much in nature. So the kids go to like a school that's on a 20-acre farm,
Oh,
and
I love that.
yeah, so we kind of chose this lifestyle for the kids. I
Hmm.
prefer cities. So sometimes, every free chance I get, I'm off to San Francisco. But I think, being in nature, there's something really soothing about that. And so, yes, the drawing, any kind of creative expression, whether it's singing or dancing or yeah, we are definitely away from screens most of the time. So
Hmm.
we're like the boring parents, but I think in the long run, the children are so full and rich of imagination and just kind of allowing them to be children.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
they're dying to grow up, I mean, my 14-year-old is dying to be 20. It's just like, oh my God, if I could just go back to being,
I know. Those
incoming
years are
ninth
so fun.
grader.
Hmm.
But I think, I also have these little mindfulness cards that I do with the kids. So it's a different set of, it's like a multiple set. I got it on Etsy actually. And they prompt you around the dinner table with like really interesting questions. And it's all about like stopping and noticing different parts of your body or the last time you cried or when was the last time you felt really alive. There's a lot of really interesting prompts that
Hmm.
create great conversation. Even if your child's only like 5 or 6, they can
Yeah.
participate. So I really believe in, I mean, I know I'm Italian, but we're always around a table together. And I think if you can open conversation, it's not even about what you eat, it's just to be together.
Hmm.
And maybe each child can have their own specific night where they, can be the moderator or they can ask the questions and kind of give them a little autonomy in that. So yeah, I think just allowing space to be imaginative, be creative, slow down, not be so overscheduled, even with like after school activities.
Hmm.
Um,
I mean, it
there,
adds up quick,
yeah,
but
and you can't be mindful and aware when you're running around and you haven't eaten lunch and you're all over
yeah.
the place. Like we do it as adults too, So I think there is something sacred about creating that space.
Yeah, I love that. And I really think it's about whether it's journaling or writing or the cards. I love that idea. I need to go look into that, those cards. It's just really about setting the intention to be intentional, with
Yeah.
your time.
Yes.
And it's the more you do it as a family, the more you do it as your, as the parent modeling to your kids. And yes, that means that, adults, like if you're sitting at the dinner table, yes, your phone should be up too. You're not going to, if you don't let your kid have your tablet at the table, which I hope you don't, then your phone needs to be put up as well. And, the more they see that you're doing that and that you make those kinds of comments, the more that just comes more naturally to them. And like they don't even realize they're being that mindful or aware, but it's just part of who they are. Like we don't live in Napa Valley, but we live on a little farm in Texas. And, we just have big open skies. And we have the most beautiful sunsets. We have beautiful sunrises. We have, the animals are out grazing and the birds are chirping and, we're notice every little animal that lives on our property. And, I love noticing stuff like that. And I think just by me pointing it out all these years, like, oh my gosh, look at the sunset, you guys. Now my kids will point it out to me. Like my son will come and be like, Mom, Mom, Mom. And I'm like, what? What's on fire? What's the matter? He's like, go look at the sunset right now. And I was like, oh, I'm like, that's awesome. Like so you don't realize all these little habits that are forming that,
Yeah.
kind of keep snowballing as they get older. So I love having those practices and habits put in place.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I think also kids kind of pick up on not what even is not said. It's
Mm-hmm.
just the things that are not said are kind of absorbed into their self, and you don't realize it as a parent, but they pay attention to everything.
They really do.
And so if you can model that, that kind of sense of wonder, we've lost a lot of that just because our
Mm-hmm.
culture is so instantaneous with media and just instant gratification. It's like if you want something, you probably could get it within the next couple of
Yes.
hours.
That's crazy.
And life was never like that before. Just spending money, like you have that thing on your phone, the Apple Pay or
Yeah,
something.
you
It's
don't
like,
even realize you do it. It just
let's
happens so
type it.
easily. Like, I think I
Yeah,
just swiped something and paid 20
I
bucks
think
for
I
that.
just
So,
bought something. Yeah. So, it's just we are less cognizant of these things. And I think just bringing more awareness to our lives. Like
yeah.
whenever I go for an author visit at schools, it's probably one of my favorite things to do. I
It is.
start every session with we close our eyes, we take a breath, and we do just like a 20-second meditation so that they're grounded and they have arrived in the space. And so you can do that anytime, anywhere with your kids as well, so they're eager to follow your lead.
They are. They really are.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have to say, like, okay, we're going to meditate. Cause they'll be like, oh, man, but like, okay, let's just pause, and like you said, close your eyes, take a breath, notice where you're feeling right now or, any little thing. So I love that.
My children ask me for a meditation every night before
Do
bed.
they?
And I have never said, okay, are you ready to meditate? I mean, we've
Yeah.
never really talked about it. We
Kind of
started
do
this
it.
little
Yeah.
ritual, and if they don't do it, it's like something has been missing for them that night. So it's really beautiful, and you kind of just see it organically play out.
Yeah.
So I highly encourage all your listeners to, pause and kind of less is more. So
Yes, even as adults, we have to start
yes,
these practices. Yes,
yes,
because I mean, I love
100%.
doing yoga, and I don't ever say, "Hey, kids, you want to come do yoga?" But if I bring out my mat, my kids show up out of nowhere. My dogs show up the cat is on the mat. Like everybody's on the
Yes,
mat wanting to
yes,
do yoga and stretching and breathing and those stress relief kind of habits. They don't realize necessarily what they're doing, but they just know that their body feels calm
yes,
and relaxed and like you feel better. Like, maybe subconsciously they're
yes,
like, oh, this is cool. This is good for my body, my mind, whatever, especially right before bed. That's
yes,
we like to stretch and do yoga before bed, but you know, it really helps them calm down. Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing.
Okay. So we ventured to Paris and to Rome. What's the next stop on your author journey?
So my son Dean is going to London, and it's a city I did some studying in when I was young, in my late 20s. And it's just a terrific city. So I look forward to I do look forward to having a boy. My,
Hmm.
my series so far is rather girly, and so I look forward to featuring my son Dean.
Yes,
So
that'll be cool. I was just telling you before we started how I love your illustrations because they're just beautiful book covers, and I'm I'm picky about that. As in, I really appreciate beautiful covers. But I was kind of the same way with Blooming Rose. Yes, it's based off of my daughter, but so I made her best friend a boy to kind of counteract it, and I didn't want it to be too girl heavy. But I love, when you have that range. But I guess you'll have a fourth book out eventually, right? When you said you had 4 kids.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So little Theodore will be going somewhere. I
Oh.
haven't decided yet, but yeah, it'll
Okay.
be
And you mentioned you have another book coming out, not in the series though, but that's coming out later this year, you said?
in September. So it's
Okay.
away from this traveling mindfulness series, but
Mm-hmm.
it's called, I've coined the acronym for U, Y.O.U, meaning
Mm-hmm.
your own unfolding. And
Oh, love
so
that.
it's called You Yoga. And I have really found that we harbor all of our greatest truth and joy within us. So it's a children's book centered around yoga, but it really is about not reaching externally for happiness. We actually already have all of it within us. And it's kind of celebrating the magical humans that we are. So
Oh.
it's a different illustrator.
Mm-hmm.
And I chose to go a different path on the illustrations just because this book is a little more like raw and in nature. My characters are animals,
Oh,
so
cute.
that it would give kind of a unisex,
Playful. Yeah.
playful. Also, a lot of the poses in yoga are named after animals, so it has that kind of theme running through
Yeah.
it. It's really
We're
really
big
great.
cat cow fans over here.
Awesome, awesome. We have chickens. Yeah, we have the whole gamut over here. Bunnies, chickens, kitties. Yeah, it's really fun. But
Cool. I
I
love that.
look forward to that book coming out in September.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yes.
Okay, and just FYI, of course, Maria's books and all of these mentioned in each episode of our podcast are always linked on our website, bloomingrosekids.com/podcast. So Maria, thank you again so much for joining us. Before you go, can you tell our listeners where they can go to check out more about your series and your wine, if they're interested in that too, and all the things you have going on?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Lauren. I can be reached at Maria Moore Author. That's my Instagram and Facebook handle. And then my website that has a more comprehensive view of everything I do is mariacastellucci-moore-author.com.
Great. So I'll link both of those in our show notes as well. And yeah, I visited your website the other day and it has so much information on there. It's great. Okay. It has been such a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much. And that is it for this week's episode. So I hope you've gained a couple of helpful nuggets on what is mindfulness and how to practice and model it for your own kiddos. And we'll see you guys next time on the Blooming Books podcast. Maria, thanks again.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you for listening to the Blooming Books podcast, recorded and produced by Blooming Rose Kids. We've opted to keep our series ad-free, and if you'd like to support our efforts, please consider shopping our own custom-signed Blooming Rose books at bloomingrosekids.com and our academic materials on our Teachers Pay Teachers page. All of the books mentioned in this episode are also available via our affiliate links in the show notes. We so appreciate you being here and hope to see you next time.